Thinking, think I'm live now, so I'm gonna go ahead and just get started as people log in. Good afternoon. This is welcome to Q&A with Jay. I'm Javon Howard, Engaging Men Coordinator here with the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. I wanted to do this basically lunch and learn with everyone. This is a new project that I'm starting to try to connect with more people, to connect with more communities, and also the intention is to connect with familiar faces as well. This is a time for us to be able to have opportunity to discuss, go through a few questions about working with male survivors, working with engaging men in violence prevention. I do have a few questions that I have already had folks submit to me earlier. Thank you everyone for your questions that you submitted. Thank you if you've joined us already. I see some waves coming in. I don't usually do live, so this is new for me, so I apologize if it's too formal, not formal enough. I'm just trying to enjoy my time with you during our lunch. So like I was saying, I invite you to ask questions in the chat, to make comments, or to join in the discussion in any way that you can. So with that being said, I'm going to get started. I'm going to try to take my time as I go through some of these questions. We have about 30 minutes or so at the most together. I'm just going to go through the questions and see how long it takes. I have 3 that we have set up. If you guys have more that you wanted to join in and ask, I'm more than happy to discuss those while we have time together here right now. So the first question that I have, I didn't actually have anything posted about whether or not we wanted to share who were sending me these submissions or not. So for the time being, I'm going to keep folks' identities confidential for where these submissions came from. But the first question that I do have is, how do you help men beyond initial shame responses when they are learning about gender-based violence and related systemic issues? Okay, so I'm going to repeat that again. How do you help men beyond initial shame responses when they are learning about gender-based violence and related systemic issues? So my first thing with that question, I would say it depends on the role and the context here. My first thoughts about, when we're talking about engaging men around learning about gender-based violence, learning about power, learning about privilege, even identifying specifically their roles and maybe how they're doing harm or carrying this power and carrying this context. My first and foremost thing would be to encourage boundaries for yourself. When we're educating people and we're giving them knowledge, this is important to try to invoke people to join us as allies, as comrades, to have this awareness about their own actions and behaviors. But at the same time, we also want to protect our own boundaries. It is not our responsibility to necessarily walk people through all of their shame responses. It's not necessarily our responsibility to walk people through some of the initial guilt responses that they might have when they're recognizing and learning about power and privilege that they might carry. This is a natural response that we all have when we learn that perhaps we are not moving through a space in a way that we intended, that maybe we're having an impact that we did not intend to have. This is normal. This is okay and fine for folks to have this initial shame response. When it gets to the point in where you're having to ask the question, hi Taylor, when we get to the point where we have to ask the type of questions about how do we really move people through the shame responses, that's when the labor starts to shift a little bit too much. The purpose of us educating people and educating men about systemic issues and about this is for them to take that initiative in the first place and for them to take on that labor. For you to give them information is supposed to be an exchange. It's an exchange of labor, it's to share it. So that would be my first response to that, would be that encouragement of your own boundaries when you're working through that. However, if you are wanting to learn more specifically about guiding folks through those shame responses, I would say one, just being patient. Like I said, that we all have those responses. We all feel bad when we don't intend to when we make harm or do harm when we don't intend to. So to be patient with folks, to take your time, to know that, okay, this person is perhaps hearing me, but in this moment they are centering themselves. In this moment they need to center themselves because ultimately that's the objective. We want them to be able to analyze and introspect. So then that will go into the second point, would be to ask clarifying questions. So how can I help you better understand this? Is there any specific support that I can offer for you that can help me, that help you understand like your role and what more you can do here besides just having this withdrawal response and this response where we kind of like shrink. How can we take this energy and turn it into action? Whether that's an action where it's donating, an action where we're going to read an article together, maybe you're going to look up a book recommendation, maybe have continuing conversations and setting up appointments and times for that. So it's just transferring that energy into an energy of action and encouraging them to take that action themselves. So that was the first question. Hopefully that covers and answers that. So the second question that we did have come in also, this is actually a frequently asked question, so it's something I do cover a lot in some of my trainings. I am working on a blog post that talks about this, but the question is, what are explicit ways that we can engage men? So that's a very common question. It is a little vague. And again, this is why, this is my job, right? Engaging men coordinator. So, main part of my role is trying to have this conversation around these cultural shifts of asking that question. Ultimately, what does it mean to engage men? What does it mean to you to engage men? When we're asking what are explicit ways that we engage men, I'm assuming that the question is asking in violence prevention. And also in working with male survivors. So I'm gonna touch points on both. So the first thing for how do we engage men in working with male survivors. So how do we work with men? How do we get men to come forward seeking services? That seems to be the general barrier. We know that 1 in 33, I'm thinking worldwide, that's a lot of stats. So 1 in 33 boys, I think worldwide, 1 in 53 if we're talking nationally, and then 1 in 6 for men who are boys and men who experience sexual violence of some kind. So for trying to shrink that gap and get through that barrier, I would say one, consistent messaging is important. Consistent messaging and outreach that are focused on what services that we provide, with the hotlines, support groups, court, going through services with external partners if necessary, really focusing this is what we do. We are advocates, and making sure that we are having that messaging that we are advocates for survivors. That includes male survivors, that includes men. Having that consistent messaging is very important. We have to see it over and over again because we already have this oversaturation in the culture. When we think of survivors and we think of violence and we think of sexual violence, we think of man and woman, and we think of penis, vagina, penetration. So these are the cultural images that the general public, that an everyday person, a survivor, might even hold about what services may or may not look like for them. So to have that consistent messaging that disrupts that, what word am I looking for? That disrupts that cultural perspective, that disrupts this narrative that we have, that disrupts these myths. Ultimately, that survivorship looks a certain kind of way. To have that consistent messaging is important. To have that outreach accompanied with that into the community with our male survivors. If they're not coming to our services and they're not coming to rape crisis centers for services, more than likely they're seeking those services either by themselves. Men overall ultimately are very isolated. And now that we're in the pandemic, we're going through COVID-19, and there's always multiple mutations and different surges that we're having. This isolation is more and more and more. It's very difficult for folks who already don't have the language, don't have the knowledge or even the confidence to know that they can seek services, and they're already isolated. So being mindful of that, we need to go to places where people are going, where people already are. So going into the community and outreach and putting up resources, reminding folks if you have this life experience, these services are for you. If you are a male survivor, these services are for you. In addition to that, I would say with the consistency, do it like you mean it. Say it over and over again and say it like you mean it. That you really can help and that you really want to help. I say that from the perspective of thinking about a trauma survivor, right? We're thinking about male survivors. We're thinking about men from this perspective of how they're viewing the world as a survivor. The way that we communicate, the way that we have language towards people, it can be perceived a certain kind of way. So we're talking about this is Black History Month. This is Teen Dating Violence Month. We have SAM coming up, Sexual Assault Awareness Month. For some folks, this is viewed and perceived as like, you guys are just outreaching because you feel like you need to outreach. You're just reaching and looking toward this way because you haven't been looking toward this way. There's bitterness, there's resentment. There's this entire culture that we're sort of moving with and against at the same time. So to be mindful of that with our language and how we're doing our outreach. So to really stress that, we are here to help and we do want to help. We're not just saying male survivors, and we're not just, having an engaging men coordinator because it looks good. And we're not trying to do this because it looks good. It's because it's a part of the mission, because you are part of the mission. So just really emphasizing that is important. Empowerment, encouragement to share narratives and share stories. Of course, we don't always want folks to feel like they have to share their story and they have to come forward in order to seek services. But for some folks, this is helpful to have that space, to have that support group, or to have that opportunity to be able to share those narratives and to share those stories. So to be intentional about creating that space for men, to create that space like, hey, we have a space where maybe you can come do poetry, a space where you can come share some art projects, some space where maybe we can, hire a photographer and have a class where someone leads a photography class, and we can talk about what this art that you created in this class means to you and to whatever trauma that you're experiencing. So having things that are very, very sensory and having that space where folks can actually talk and share in community, creating that over and over again. We all, especially in Ohio, I would say, being very rural heavy, we all face the challenge of having low capacity with some of our groups, low capacity with our attendance, low capacity with barriers with transportation, with access. So that's where that consistency comes in again. Folks seeing that come up over and over and seeing that you're making that effort and that you're continuously trying to build reminds people that, okay, this is a resource that's here for me. Maybe I don't feel like it's a resource today, but I see that they're trying to build something, they're trying to create something. I'm going to keep an eye on that. Maybe I'll send somebody else to go check it out. If I hear someone else who used those services, I'll be more interested and curious of asking them, how was that experience for you? I've noticed that they had this group for me, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to go, and I heard that you went, and community. Folks are curious. When people want what they want, they find a way to get what they want and find a way to get what they need. Ultimately, we want to create a space and a pipeline where folks get what they need without having to do things that feel unethical for themselves. We want them to feel like they have the power to self-determine for themselves. And so our role really is to try to create as much space and create as many pipelines and connections as possible, and plug into the networks that people have already created for themselves. So that was a lot for violence prevention. I know that was not violence prevention. Working with male survivors. I'm going to pause there for a second just to check the little chat here. I thought I saw a couple of things. I saw some hearts. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Love that. Okay. So working with engaging men for violence prevention. So the question again, what are explicit ways we can engage men? So I would say violence prevention, or did I switch that up? Give me a moment. It's all kind of blending together. Strength-based, asset-based, so I would say this is both violence prevention and working with them. So it all overlaps. It's kind of like the thing with the role. It's hard to sort of split it up. Excuse me. This is Nobu. I'm not sure if you can see him or you can't see him. Excuse me. I'm in a live, sir. He gets jealous whenever I'm talking to anyone else. So he's going to join us for a moment. So working with survivors or creating specific kind of curriculums, I think that's what the question kind of was gearing towards a little bit with this part of the question. So I would say focus on things that are strengths-based and assets-based curriculum development, things that are educational about trauma. So again, thinking about from the folks of like male survivors, where men often don't think of themselves as survivors. They don't think of themselves as victims. They don't. There's usually some sort of identity crisis. There's some sort of different cultural understanding around this language about survivorship. So kind of leaning more into that of understanding, like thinking about education, about just like giving those specifics around what is trauma? What does it mean to be a survivor? What does it mean to you to be a survivor? What does it mean to you to be a victim? Like, what are these terms? To really like give that education and defining those things, to really talk about the specifics of what trauma is, how does it affect the brain, the body, how it affects your social relationships, your identity. Like having those awareness and resources and communication is important. Educational identity, relationships, and sexuality. I know that for those of us who work in prevention, who are educators in some kind of way, in some form or fashion, we know that there are barriers for some of these conversations and the things that we're able to teach in schools and in certain community spaces about sexual orientation, about gender. Now we're having issues with being able to talk about anti-oppression and talking about critical race theory and how these things interact with larger institutions and systems. So I know that these things are barriers, but we also don't always have to have these conversations, at work. When we're talking about engaging men, we can have this conversation. These things can be applicable outside of work as well. Talking about educating folks about gender, sexuality, relationships, trauma, identity, those things are important. Listening and being non-judgmental, that goes for everyone, always, all the time. To be as compassionate, as graceful as possible with folks, and listen as non-judgmental as possible. Again, when folks are disclosing, if it's the first time that they're disclosing, this is a direct correlation to whether or not they seek services in the future, on how the person responds to them when it's the first person they're disclosing to. So whenever someone is disclosing to us or sharing with us, we want to be listening non-judgmentally. We want to be giving them eye contact as much as possible. We want to be showing that we are present and reminding folks that we believe them. And so these things overall open up space for folks to continue on for services, whether they do it the next day, a week later, or years later. It is a trajectory for a more positive route of healing. Providing language and opportunities to communicate is important. And use of various curriculums like A Call to Men. The National Sexual Violence Resource Center has an amazing resource with working with male survivors. They've been building on that for a while. They just had a whole host of things that just dropped out last summer. So definitely check that out. Men's Healing is a good resource, and also Men Can Stop Rape. So I'm going to pause there for a second. See any more comments. Just still love for the kitty cat. And then I have one more question. And this one, it came through my email, so I adjusted it. There's context to it. So the context for this question is they wanted to understand that their partner was a survivor. He's a man, but they have been married for a certain amount of years. And he only has just now disclosed that he was a survivor. So the question being, what are reasons that men still do not come forward? So that's a really heavy situation. This is also a common situation that I see that happens. When I was doing direct service, when I was doing work, volunteering, and obviously now still coming through my email every once in a while, where men just still are not coming forward. And what are some of those reasons that men do not come forward? Well, there's a lot of reasons that men aren't coming forward. One being culturally speaking, men do not have the language to see themselves reflected in the movement. They do not. We have this language around victimization, and this language about victimization actually comes out of a very specific history around white feminism and a lack of a class, race, geography analysis of violence and trauma. Without this particular analysis, one, we're leaving men behind. We don't have this analysis that intersects all of our experiences as people and how we show up with our social locations. And so without that, we have this culture where, again, violence only looks like man versus woman. It only looks like, cis man versus cis woman. It only looks like this particular kind of penetration. So men do not come forward because we have this language where they are only perpetrators. We have this culture and this understanding that they can only ever be perpetrators. And then we have this world where we only respond to them as perpetrators because many of our services are only geared to service women and children. And of course, all of this comes again back to the original issues of patriarchy, the original issues of white supremacy and racism, these institutions of power and control. It always comes back to power and control when we're talking about these larger institutions. And these things do not serve men as well. These are the main reasons why men do not come forward. They don't see themselves reflected, and this is directly why that's the case. Men don't see themselves reflected. What else is there? Trying to be mindful of some of the things that I name. We know that there are barriers with support groups, with capacity. It is a very female-dominated field, and so many of our advocates are women or female-identified. Men are often prevention educators or moved into a space of allyship and spaces of talking about violence prevention and not necessarily as advocates. And so again, not seeing themselves reflected as fully human, as being able to feel trauma and experience trauma. We have rites of passages where we tell boys that they have to always be hyper promiscuous and hypersexual. They all have to be ready to go for any kind of sexual encounter with any woman. If you're a gay man, it's the same thing, feeling like you have to always be ready, always be hypersexual, that any kind of experience that you have that's a sexual experience that was bad was just a bad sexual experience. It's not considered to be, perhaps it was trauma or it was a sexual assault. These things, we don't have this language that really supports what people understand what their experiences are, to be able to even identify what is going on, to know to come forward. If there is doubts, there's the lack of trust about themselves, that they should have known better. How come they didn't know better? They should have been strong enough to fight their assailant, to defeat their assailant. Why did they freeze? Sometimes there are physiological responses where men may get erections. They might even ejaculate when there is an assault. There might be a lot of confusion around, well, why did that happen? Is this normal? Is that not normal? We know we have PTSD that is a direct response to sexual violence as well. And just like the way we have mental health services and health services, these larger institutions where we're talking about people want ultimately to reestablish harmony, to reestablish and restore whatever harm that has been caused or whatever violation that they feel has happened. And so we don't have these other institutions that people rely on to essentially treat the symptoms that they're going through. And without these other support systems, again, men being very isolated, they're not coming forward. And so we have a lot of different intersecting pieces that we have to work on to really get that grinding gear to get men to move forward and come forward in a way that we're needing. I want to say that we're needing, but we're hoping to provide for them when we know that this is a crisis, that we know that these are services that are needed. It's complicated because we're talking about it comes back to that system of power and control. It comes back to patriarchy. And if it's patriarchy is the social political system in which we position where men and male identified folks have the most autonomy. They are the ones who are dominating and control over women, men, and children, often in ways that are violent. If that is the case, we are working with a population that has the key for the lock that they're in. So it's sort of like in this bind where the traumas that you experience make it more difficult to disrupt the privileges that you possess, if that makes sense. Which again comes back around to being a barrier for coming forward, and then even being a barrier, what's the word I'm looking for? A barrier for violence prevention as well. So those were the 3 questions that I had come in for my submission today. I'm going to pause there. We have about 5 minutes before I felt like maybe I was talking too much. This, again, is Q&A with Jay. The plan is to have this every, I think, second Wednesday. Is this the second Wednesday or the first Wednesday? I don't even know what day it is. It's been a long month. It's the 9th. But it's every second Wednesday, talking about engaging men, working with male survivors. Which put out a call for questions, just to have a conversation. I want this to be kind of sort of like office hours in a sense. So yeah, if you have any questions left, I'm happy to chat with you all. I'm just having my little lunch here too. I actually left my chips in the kitchen. I'm a little tempted to take you back there with me because it is, but I'm just gonna walk and wait. Do we have any questions for me? How did I do? Did you learn anything new? Was there anything that you need to know? Naming that additional isolation men can do and experience is important. Yes. The isolation, I think, I need to find the statistic. But there was like an insane stat about how isolated and lonely men are. I think it was just like almost like 80%. I feel like every stat when you look at men is like 80%. Like, well, no matter what you're looking at, whether it's good or positive, it's like 80% of men. So 80% of men are like suffering in isolation and know that they are, but don't have the language to really be able to get themselves out. So it's a very interesting space. How can we keep that door open for men in our lives who have disclosed but are not ready for healing journeys yet? Yes, that's an excellent question. Thank you. I would say, one, just like having that heart space already for wanting to keep that door open already sets you up for, a good logic in how you would move and maneuver in a day-to-day life. I think it's about the way that we just live and practice. So it's about like how we interact with people, because we never really know what someone is going through. We never know what someone wants to share or feels what they need to see or feel from you in order to feel safe to share. It's just to be as much of a safe space as possible that you feel that you can be. So, when we're communicating with people, it's about just like that day-to-day respect for everyone. Like, look me in the eyes when I'm talking to you. So when I'm talking to you, I'm sharing with you, maybe I'm sitting down with you because I casually just want to have coffee. But really in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if this coffee goes the way that I hope it goes, then maybe this is someone I can share with what I'm really thinking about. So look me in my eyes when I'm talking to you. Put your phone down when you're spending time with somebody. Ask questions and check in on folks about how you're feeling, how are you doing, what's going on in your life, what ways can I support you. Just continuously creating that space is important. And ultimately, folks are just going to come forward when they're ready. And that's really the best that we can do. If we have a feeling that maybe somebody needs some more support and aren't ready to share that support, so like maybe you found out or and they just haven't told you themselves, maybe like leave resources around. Like, I don't, like, be kind of like sneaky about that. Like, leave resources around that might be helpful. People pay attention to things that you do. So be mindful what you say, what you do, what you post online, what you advocate for, how you advocate for it. People are watching, people see and hear, and from there they make those decisions, and hopefully that will be enough. And thank you for that. Also celebrating micro wins. My partner identifies toxic men when we walk through our day-to-day life, and even having the language is a win to me. Yes, having that language is important. Being able to name things. I used to say all the time that college, the main thing that it ever really gave me was language and opportunity. That I believe that all of us, we live here. Like we are one village, we're one cohort. We watch the news, we live here in our neighborhoods, we think, we feel, we know what's going on with things that are going on in our world. Whether we feel disconnected from that, and there's so many things that we can never possibly keep track of, ultimately we know what we are experiencing. We know what we feel, we know what's just, we know when we're being disrespected, we know when we need something and it's not being met. Having the language to name it makes it so much, gives you so much more power, because then you're able to say, I need you to listen. I didn't know this is what I needed before because I didn't have the word listen. I had the word, all I knew was to scream. All I knew was to shout. All I knew was to throw the table. And you're just trying to figure out what it was that I wanted. And I got the language, I need you to listen. And now I can say it. And now I can tell you. And it gives me so much more power, because then I can go around saying, I want to be heard. I need to be listened to. And now I can actually aim it and get what I need and get something from it that way. So that language is so powerful. And again, like opportunity, having access, having opportunity to then exercise on that language and exercise to be able to get those needs met. Again, that is very connected to power, very connected to privilege, because not all of us have equal ability to then articulate and ask for what we want, and to even utilize the language, even if it gives us the power to change things. So there is a back and forth. But that's a good point as well. Thank you for sharing that. See, some thank yous, light bulb moments. There we go. Maybe we should change it from Q&A to J to light bulb moments. And then we just swap out me with other folks. It doesn't have to just be me. We'll just do light bulb moments, and we'll just talk. Okay. We gotta work with systems so they can learn to listen even when the language isn't quite there. Yeah. And that's the tricky part, right? Because like much of the language isn't here already. Most people don't know the language if it is around. So it's always this constant sort of innovating, and it's a struggle. And that's literally why it's called a struggle, because it's this constant struggle. But I'm happy to be in struggle with all of you. Okay. But I'm not sure if I'm seeing any more questions coming through. I love being able to do this and be able to talk with folks. But I am just right here. I am technically here sort of by myself, so it's a little awkward. So, that being said, I did commit to at least 12:30, and we are at 12:34. So with that being said, I am going to conclude the Q&A with Jay for today. We will have another Q&A with Jay next month on March. Let me get my calendar really quick just so I can let you know. It would be March 9th. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, so March 9th, catch me again. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to either email me. You can go to OSV's website. You can send us an email there. You can get it to me that way. Feel free to follow us if you aren't already following us. Again, we have Q&A with Jay next month. I'm also doing a Men of Color healing space that meets every fourth Monday every month. We have one coming up at the end of this month. We'll be talking about networking and how to make friends within the movement as a man of color. So please join us and share the word. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, thank you, thank you. All right. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. If you're on lunch, enjoy the rest of your lunch. And I'll see you next time. Nobu says bye. He's literally hopping around. Bye. I don't know how to exit.